Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com. So, here's a riddle. What is round, finish, and fits in a box? No, it is not the Fazer Chocolate Special Gift Assortment, although the Fazer Chocolate Special Gift Assortment is round and finished, and it comes in a box, and it's delicious. I'm talking about Sibelius cycles. Complete Sibelius cycles by individual conductors. Because I know we've already done a survey of the IDEAL Sibelius cycle, where we take one performance of each symphony from the different cycles or the outlier sort of individual performances and put them together into our ideal cycle. But we also have to talk about the boxes, the individual boxes of all of the symphonies by specific conductors, and there are so many of them. Holy cow, so many of them. I have, I don't know, about 20 or 21 of them sitting right here next to me. And there are many more than that. This is just stuff that I decided I was going to see what I had, so that I could put a little talk together. And I thought, well, let me start pulling out a few, just the best ones. And I kept pulling them out. And there were more and more and more. And the stack was getting higher and higher and higher. And I haven't even gone to the overflow room. It's kind of frightening how many there are. It really is. And a lot of these conductors have done multiple Sibelius cycles, and we'll talk about those too. So while I have like 20 or 21, I think, actually, in this stack, I really haven't even counted. There will be more than that we will discuss. So this may be a long one, and I'm warning you in advance. Now, just for the sake of convenience, I have divided this stack up into what I call the crappy pile of lousy Sibelius cycles, which I've hung on to or accumulated for reasons I can't really explain, just laziness because I haven't gotten rid of them yet. And then we have what I call the dysfunctional pile, which is cycles that should have been good that aren't because of a very particular reason, which I will tell you in a minute. And then we have the pretty good pile, basically good, decent. They get the style, but just not the best for whatever reason. Usually it has to do with sonics or the quality of the orchestral playing, and sometimes, conducting that just is a little bit on the softer, flabby side, but you'll get there too. And then I have 7 really top-notch Sibelius cycles that I will have to go through one at a time, and we're going through all these one at a time. So that's going to be the map of the talk, basically. And we'll start with the crappy stuff because that's fun and work our way down. But the problem that Sibelius presents to most interpreters, and the defects in the worst cycles quite often, all are of a kind usually. That kind is, well, at least in the dysfunctional ones, the problem is that the first 2 symphonies are stylistically very, very different from the rest. The first 2 are in his earlier romantic, sort of Tchaikovskyan, heroic vein, and the other ones are neoclassical and more thoughtful, more organically cohesive, and it really makes it difficult for some interpreters to wrap their brains around both. Particularly today, younger conductors, I find, can do very, very well with some of the later works. The ones that didn't really make much of an impression back in the day, like the 3rd or the 6th, but they really mess up the first 2, which is just weird because that's just the opposite of what was happening back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, where everybody was doing the first 2 and usually did them very well because conductors were comfortable in the romantic idiom. And they weren't embarrassed and they weren't inhibited and they just let it hang out and it worked really well. But they had sometimes a difficult time grappling with Sibelius's more how shall we say, restrained and intellectual work that came later. I don't understand why anybody would have a problem with any of it, frankly. It's all marvelous. It all sounds like Sibelius. You can follow his style. And some of these sets include Kullervo, by the way, and some do not. But what can I tell you? So when we talk about Sibelius cycles, I just want to emphasize it's the numbered symphonies that we're emphasizing 1 through 7, because as you know, Sibelius wrote 9 symphonies. There is Kullervo, the early Kullervo, which is a choral symphony along the lines of, for example, the Faust and Dante symphonies of Liszt, or the early symphonies of Mahler. I mean, Sibelius and Mahler had much more in common than people believe. You know what I mean? Even though they were portrayed as polar opposites in the popular literature. And the second symphony, again, isn't a program symphony. It's the Lemminkainen legends, the tone poems, the 4 of those, which, you know, if you look at these 4 movement symphonies, you know, the Harold in Italy or Manfred by Tchaikovsky. I mean, there's lots of symphonies like that. They're 4 movement, tone poem-ish things, even like Alsatian, like Strauss. Sibelius's Lemminkainen has more of a claim to being a symphony than a lot of other of those works, because it really does exploit very strict sonata forms in places. But Sibelius broke it up, and the individual movements are all played separately, so it's generally not considered one of the symphonies, but it really ought to be. However, we need to talk about the 7 numbered symphonies, because that's what usually comes in the round finish box. And that is what we will discuss. So let's start with the crappy symphonies. Not symphonies, the crappy performances of the symphonies, the crappy sets. Oh, these are so bad. I have to talk about one that I don't have sitting here. It's actually in the overflow room. I do own it, you know, just to take it out as an example of awfulness. This is a sentimental favorite of so many people. That's Anthony Collins on Decca with the London Symphony. It's in mono. It's from the 50s. It sucks in so many different ways. It's not to say that Collins was not a Sibelian. He was. I mean, he understood how the music should go. And there are, in all of these lousy cycles, good moments. I mean, how could there not be? So I don't want to see comments from you folks like, oh, well, number isn't so bad. That's true. But what we're doing is playing a game of comparisons. That's what this is about. The idea here is that you are going to take your hard-earned shekels and you're going to spend them. And you want to spend them in a way which gives you the best value for your money. And so it's not that these things, when I say they suck or they're terrible, are in some objective sense atrocious. It's that there's so much better that's out there. Now, if you love them, you love them. There's nothing I can say or do. I won't try to change your mind. That's your privilege. But we are talking about 20 to 30 to 40 complete Sibelius cycles that are available. And anybody can do the comparisons in real time. And when you take Anthony Collins, you have, first of all, so-so sound, because it's mono, and it's not even great mono. I mean, it's okay. And then you've got horrible orchestral playing by the London Symphony, which is really the conductor's fault, because they made some wonderful recordings in the 50s. They were not a great orchestra then. I mean, all of the big European orchestras in the immediate post-war period often had problems, because they were rebuilding. I mean, it's absolutely natural. That's why the American orchestras began to get such acclaim, because they remained fabulous for the most part, whereas the European orchestras sort of, you know, they were decimated. And you can't blame them for that. It was the war, you know, but you also can't delude yourself that they were fabulous right afterwards. This is true of Berlin. This is true of Vienna. They if you listen to the recordings they made in the 50s, they made some really bad slovenly ones because they just weren't themselves. And they later reacquired the luster for which they have become since quite famous, and deservedly so. So you've got this horrible London Symphony Orchestra. You've got a conductor who seems not to be able to corral them, to surpass themselves in the music. You've got mono sound, and the result is just has so many bad moments, so many moments of awful playing and indifferent conducting. I mean, whether it's just fast and glib, or he just misses, you know, what's going on in terms of balance and texture. It's an endless litany of defects Anthony Collins is. And, if I just think so many people, and I don't want to be critical, but I mean, I just can't help it. So many people have either not sufficient knowledge to know how bad it is, or a sort of lemming-like belief from having read Gramophone magazine for too long, or some other source of, sort of, fawning worship of historical recordings because they're old and lousy sounding, that they have to like Anthony Collins. No, do not listen to anyone who tells you it's a great Sibelius cycle. And I'm not talking about people who already like it. Like I said, go like it, have fun. But for those of you who are looking for a Sibelius cycle, avoid Anthony Collins. And here are some others to avoid as well. Oh, yes. Maazel Vanska's Minnesota Sibelius cycle. This is his second one. Maazel Vanska has become such a sad story in the history of modern music. I mean, a terrific guy. He made lots of great recordings with the Lotte Symphony for Bis. Then he went to Minnesota, and he became this micromanager, this sort of affected. I can't explain it. I mean, he just went to pieces. The playing on these things is fabulous, but it's playing qua playing. It doesn't seem to matter what they're playing. They do all the same things. There's the super micro pianissimo, and there's this, I mean, this overall flatness that comes from excessive control opposed from the podium. The players never achieve their natural expressivity. This was the big disappointment. It won all kinds of awards like Grammys and things. Of course it did. What do you want, But boy, it's awful. It's just an awful Sibelius cycle. The last disc, the one that has like 3, 6, and 7 or whatever they are that they usually group together, the short ones, isn't so bad as the rest. But my God, it's just dreadful. And it comes with a very good Kullervo. But his earlier Lotte Kullervo was just as fine. So Kullervo, he always did well, and still does, I guess. But what a bitter, bitter disappointment Vanska was. Also, horrid. Barbaroli. Ugh, oh God, this is a soft, flabby, slow, badly played, just sad reflection on the conductor, who was a fine Sibelian. Remember, his recording of the second, the one that was with the Royal Philharmonic, is a knockout, one of the great ones, absolutely great ones. And he did some earlier Sibelius that was much better than this last cycle. These were among his last recordings. They say he was sick, he had issues, he was, all of that may be true, but the only thing that matters is the sound on the disc. This also comes with some tone poems, the Lemminkainen suite extracts. Let's see, Pohjola's Daughter, the Karelia suite, Valse, Triest, Finlandia. Those are really good. They show what he could do and what Halle could do in this music, even though they have those snake charmer oboes and, sort of creaky sounds here and there. It's okay. Sibelius can stand a few rough edges, particularly his earlier music. But the symphonies, oh boy. Again, it's a little bit like Collins. They're just a mess, simply a mess, and just too slow and too. It was just an unhappy thing. It really is, and not worthy of him. A real shocker. This one I talked about separately. It's like the worst ever Sibelius cycle. This is Colin Davis with the London Symphony. He made at least 3 Sibelius cycles. The first one of which with Boston is hands down the best. It's a great one, and we're going to talk about that. But this was the second one. It's a ruin, absolutely ruin. First of all, it has marvelous, splendid examples of absolutely atrocious playing that goes completely uncorrected. Second of all, the tempi tend to be really slow and dull in this cycle. And the sonics aren't very good either. And, I got it from, personally back from members of the LSO that they were all very unhappy with this cycle. They all knew how bad it was. But they released it anyway because, the label paid for it and they released it anyway. And of course, it got some predictable, compliments from Gramophone magazine. I remember having a conversation with Robert Layton, the late Robert Layton, who was a Norwegian or Finnish or Scandinavian music specialist, basically. And they did there was a review in Gramophone he wrote about, the Sibelius, some of these performances, the Sibelius Fifth, where they all get lost in the coda of the first movement. I mean, the timpanist gets lost and they're all off for a bar for like the whole coda. It's so embarrassing. And I said to him, don't you think as a critic you have an obligation to mention this? And of course he just looked at me and went, oh, you Americans, you're so droll, Gross. Leave it out. Okay. Also in the crappy department, Lauren Maazel's second cycle. Again, his first one was terrific. This is with Pittsburgh. The playing is awesome. Oh, it's so beautiful. Just the opposite of all the problems with this pile. You have great playing, and the Third Symphony is the greatest performance of the Third Symphony I've ever heard in my life. It's fabulous. He still had it in him. But again, he's another conductor who became kind of micromanagey and slower and heavier. And I don't know what was going on here. But this is just, in fact, I think for this cycle, I need to call on special guest critic Pipo to tell you exactly what happens when you listen to this cycle. Take it away, Pipo. Get it? Absolutely. I mean, it will knock you out entirely. It's just. Oh, and now we get the crappy and demented. This is so much fun, I have to say. This I will always keep because it's a party record. Rozhdestvensky. This is with the let's see, who is it? The Moscow Radio Symphony Orchestra. And this is, I mean, actually the tempos make sense. Conducting isn't bad, but oh, the orchestra and the sonics, holy cow. I mean, the brass playing, it will absolutely peel the paint right off of your listening room. It is so acidulous. I love that word. That is the word, acidulous. It's like a laser weapon slicing through your brain as you listen to it. My God, it's almost unlistenable, but not so unlistenable that you can't have some fun with it. This is one of those performances that, sets that's so bad, it's fun. You kind of like it just for the sheer perversity of listening to it and going, oh my God, I can't believe they just did that. And it's a shame because with a really good orchestra, it might have been a serious contender in some ways. It's kind of, oh boy, my God, what a mess. What an absolutely scarifying mess. But this is the Melodia issue. They say, of course, that this is the first time on CD. It's not. It's been around for years and years and years, sort of circulating on various labels and things. But I have to mention it because I keep it as a souvenir of horribleness. And, we all have, all of us serious collectors, right? We all have our party records, right? I mean, you got to keep something that's just so awful that it's fun. And that's where Rozhdestvensky is. But, I got to tell you, it's awful. And if you're a serious Sibelius person who doesn't know the works well, and you see this and it happens to be cheap, happily, Melodia is very expensive now, so that might be completely out of question. But, you should know. Oh, it's so terrible. Oh, that orchestra, my God. Oh, it's just unbelievable what they do to this music and how they make it sound. So, those are the crappy performances. Just to recapitulate, Vanska number 2, Barbaroli, Colin Davis number 2, Maazel number 2, Rozhdestvensky, but horrible of all, Anthony Collins. Ugh. Okay, there. Now we're going to deal with the dysfunctional ones. While I scratch my nose. Thank you. The dysfunctional ones are the ones that I think sort of show this problem that in some young conductors, and some older ones too, you're going to find out, who seem to have a problem encompassing the entirety of Sibelius's vision. That is, they do not do the first 2 symphonies as well as the last 5, more or less. This is, again, these are generalizations, but the devil is always in the details, but they sometimes do splendid work in the later symphonies, but they just don't have that romantic passion. I mean, that's the word, isn't it? Passion that the first two symphonies require. And, and despite some marvelous moments with all of them, they really did. And the symphony that usually hangs them all up is the second. Sibelius's most popular symphony. It's funny, isn't it? And here's the irony of it. The second is in some ways a transitional work. It really is. It's on its way to the third. It's already moving away from that sort of romantic looseness of form and structure. I mean, it's very tightly written. It does have a finale that goes around one too many times, so you need to keep it moving. And of course, the great performance of the second is Zell's. Anything that Zell did in the second symphony was fabulous. So cogent, so coherent, but also passionate. And, there's the Barbaroli, which is also fabulous because he really nails the passionate. You have to do both. You have to do both. And the problem with most modern performances of the second is they substitute lethargy, I think is the word, slowness, for what they take to be profundity, because the music just embarrasses them. They just can't handle its outpouring of expression, especially in the second movement and in the finale especially. I mean, that finale's got to move. If you take it too slowly, it just dies. I mean, it's a thousand deaths. It really is just awful. So these are performances that, in one way or another, underplay the first two symphonies or really mess up the second. First, John Sturgard's on Chandos with the BBC Philharmonic. In many ways, it's a beautiful cycle. He has wonderful, wonderful ideas about how to handle Sibelius's string parts, particularly, all those ostinati where it's going chugga 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 chugga, the acres of tremolo in places. But he manipulates the music far too much, especially at climaxes. I could write a whole treatise, I have to digress, on the inability of some modern conductors and modern orchestras to play loud, to be able to let a climax take shape and let the orchestra do its thing and retain good balances. You don't have to fuss with the music all the time, and you don't have to retain an iron grip on it when it's supposed to be sounding like it's bursting all bounds, right? But these conductors do. They cannot let it go. They can't stop fussing. And Sturgard's is one of those in his Sibelius cycle anyway. One of the things I always liked about Nimi Järvi, whose Sibelius cycles I don't have here, I mean his first cycle particularly, and some of the second, but originally, one of the things that made Järvi so exciting was that even though his approach was kind of casual and fast and sometimes sloppy, he never missed a climax because he let the orchestra do it. He didn't get in the way. And, conductors today, they get in the way because they can. And it is such a mistake. They don't have the humility, or they're insecure, to understand that the orchestra knows the music better than they do. And there really has to be a give and take, a feeling of trust between the conductor and the orchestra. And sometimes the conductor has to just sit back and let them play. I mean, Bernstein understood that. Remember, you see those videos where he doesn't conduct at all. I saw him do the first movement of Mahler's Sixth with the Vienna Phil at Carnegie Hall, where they're marching and he's just going boom, boom, like this, just going march, march, march. And the orchestra was carrying him along. Or that fabulous Haydn 88 finale encore he did, where he doesn't conduct. He just sits there and twitches with his face going, oh, yeah, like this. You don't always have to get in the way. And so many conductors today just do. I don't know whether it's a question of technique. I don't know. Or relationship between conductor and orchestra. I mean, the BBC Philharmonic, as I've always said, is one of the dullest orchestras in the world, but they can be excellent if they have a conductor who galvanizes them to be excellent. or in a lot of those recordings they did with Edward Downes back in the day, because they had the relationship. I mean, these things matter. You can't just shove a conductor in front of an orchestra and say, okay, do a Sibelius cycle, because the result is either going to be a mess, or it's going to be just the opposite. It's going to be one of those things where the conductor doesn't really have enough time to get comfortable with the players. And so he's always micromanaging things. He can't let go because he doesn't know what's going to happen, or he's afraid of what's going to happen. Well, this you hear a little bit of that here, because you see moments where he controls things fabulously and knows what he wants, and others where he just misses the point. So that's Storgard's. Next. And this was a sad one. This is Akukamu with the Lati Symphony. It's on Bis again. Bis keeps doing Sibelius cycles. You know, Kamu did some very good Sibelius for Deutsche Grammophon, and his better Sibelius is mixed up with Karajan Sibelius on DG, because, you know, for DG you had Karajan doing 4, 5, 6, 7, and you have Kamu, Akukamu in 1, 2, and 3, and they're very good. They're very good. Here, again, it's the micromanaging thing. You know, he's just, I think sometimes, you know, because he's a Finnish conductor and they feel they all have to do Sibelius, of course, they're Finnish, right? Yeah, Finnish, Sibelius. You know, they have to make a statement, or they're bored and they just want to do something. I mean, that's sort of how I think what happened with Maazel Vanska, you know? I mean, they have to do something. And so they do it to the music. But that isn't what the music wants to do. You have to cooperate with your music and follow it along its chosen path. So again, beautiful, beautiful moments. But the first two symphonies, no. Next, this is the Iceland Symphony Orchestra on Naxos with who's this? This is Petri Sakari. And it's again, same problem. First two symphonies, not so great. The last bunch are quite good. And you also get the Kullervo, but that's with Jorma Pandula, different conductor. Another sort of performance that's just a little on the shall we say, not terribly passionate side. And I don't have that much of a problem with this cycle because the later symphonies are beautifully done. I just think the first two need more, just more. And so those are my three sort of like, you know, younger conductors, except for Kamu, who's inexcusable, who really ought to just get into the romantic ethos or leave the music alone. Don't do cycles if you can't do them, right? Okay. Now we come up with, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cycles that are very good, that have wonderful moments, but they're just not as good as the best. And those are the hardest ones to do because, I mean, for some of you, you may like them. You may include them with your versions of the best. I mean, nothing goes terribly wrong. They have personality. They're good, but there are better ones. I mean, I would put also, I don't have it here, but, you know, Vladimir Ashkenazy's Decca cycle, I mean, because he's done more of them elsewhere, and some singleton performances besides. That's one of the sort of good ones with the Philharmonia, but it's not great. But it's a great first symphony, though. Wow. But it's not consistent. All right. This one, maybe this may belong in the less than good part. I don't know, but it's Maurice Bravanel with the Utah Symphony. You know, a lot of us got this. Maybe this is a sentimental favorite because, you know, it was cheap. But I happen to think, and the orchestra, this is one of those, you know, the mind is willing, but the flesh is weak. You know, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. I mean, if Bravanel gets Sibelius, he really, really does. The orchestra just isn't great. They don't really do anything wrong. They're just not great. I mean, their corporate sound is just not as you know, world class by any stretch of the imagination. And it's a shame because the interpretations are very, very good. They really are. And so, you know, what can I tell you? It's on Vanguard. It's a very good cycle in many ways, but it's also a little bit just second class. That's the reality, harsh though it may be. Pavel Berglund. Now, Pavel Berglund did 3 Sibelius cycles. This is his second, the digital one with the Helsinki Philharmonic. It's very good. I mean, it's Berglund. It's very good. The only problem Berglund ever has with the Sibelius symphonies is the slow tempo for the finale of the 6th. I don't know why he did that. It's marked Allegro molto. It should go much quicker. But, and he did a third one, Sibelius cycle, where it's not competitive, but it's interesting. And he even said, I did this because I just wanted to hear everything. I wanted to hear every bit of string detail. It's a very, very sort of refined Sibelius cycle of a very special type. And of its type, it's kind of amazing, but it's not. It's not. He wouldn't have even said that it encompasses everything that Sibelius should have. And I think it was really brave of him to say it, and kind of crazy of the record labels to let him do it. But that one isn't around anymore anyway. So this was the Helsinki Philharmonic one. It's very, very good. I mean, it's really very good. It took a while to finish because EMI, put it on hold so that they could do the complete Simon Rattle Sibelius cycle. Ugh. Now that would go in my dog pile, but I don't even have it. Oh, I do have it. Holy cow, it's in that horrible Rattle box of all of his Birmingham recordings. It's right over there. I mean, so I do have it. Simon Rattle belongs in the junk pile. And this one is very good. It's Berglund. It's very good. But of course, we're going to have his Bournemouth one later in the great pile. So, you can get this. You can get this and be very, very happy with it. It comes with Kullervo. And, you get some like tone poem things as well. And it's totally reliable. The only problem is that Berglund is competing with himself. And because he's competing with himself, we have to make the comparison and we have to make the choice. Right? So I did. But it's really good. Also really good. Gibson with the Royal Scottish National Orchestra on Chandos. This is not in a box. This is 3 separate discs. But I have to mention it because Gibson was a splendid Sibelius conductor. In fact, his 2-disc set of tone poems you really should get. It's really fabulous. It has the best ever Luanatar with Phyllis Brynjolfsson and the Oceanides too. Just amazing performances. Cogent. Really cogent, beautiful, effortless, flowing. He's kind of like Anthony Collins, only better. With, better playing, better sound, and I think a more natural approach to the music. But they're similar in a way. Anyway, I love these performances. I really do. But again, the playing, the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. The playing has some really scruffy moments. The strings in the 6th Symphony, for example. The very end of the first movement in the 5th, where someone is still playing when everyone else isn't. It's sort of da-da-da-da, eek. And there's like something like hanging over there. Little tiny things like that. Little tiny things. But beautiful performances. His 3rd is great. I mean, I just love these performances. What can I tell you? The sound is so right for Sibelius. So I want to mention them. And Chandos ought to just put them in a little box, stick them out there, and leave them. I don't even know if you can still get them. It's ridiculous. Which one is this now? Oh, yes. Okay. Jukka-Pekka Saraste on RCA. I am so glad this was re-released. This is a really good Sibelius cycle. And you get like all of the incidental music and tone poems too. It's 8 discs. There is no Kullervo, but virtually everything else is in here. And they're all good, solid, sensible performances. It's the Finnish Radio Symphony Orchestra. Again, not the best for certain reasons. For example, in the coda of the first movement of the 5th Symphony, Sibelius marks the trumpets mezzo forte. He actually plays the mezzo forte, thereby justifying everyone else's decision to do it louder. Because the trumpets are going da da dum bum 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 ba dum bum bum bum. Right? You got to hear them more. It just sounds a little tepid. And there are moments here that sound a little tepid. They happen to be keenly observant of Sibelius's actual dynamics, but somehow he doesn't always pull it off. But the performances on the whole are quite good. I mean, they're very consistent. There aren't any really weak links, just little moments that you wish could have been done better. And all the tone poems are really good. I mean, they're wonderful to have, and it's a cheap, budgie set, and it's worth hearing. Just not the best. Also, very interesting, but not the best, is Kurt Sanderling. This is with the Berlin Symphony. Yeah, with the Berlin Symphony, to get a couple tone poems. You can tell from the fact that this is on 4 discs instead of the usual 3 that it's Kurt Sanderling. That is, this is the most Germanic Sibelius cycle. It is slow. It is serious. It is, in places, magnificently played. Sanderling, typically really liked the 4th Symphony. Why? Because it's dark and nihilistic and tragic, and he was German, and that's what they do, dark, nihilistic, and tragic. And so there's a great performance of the 4th. There are moments in the first couple symphonies which, I don't know, the timpani sort of seem to not be where they should be. I mean, they're there, but the balances seem to me a little off. It's not an echt Sibelius sound, let's put it that way. It really isn't. But if you want to hear a somewhat heavy, rugged Germanic approach by a conductor, Sanderling spent all that time in Russia, conducting in Leningrad. I mean, he knows Russian music. He knows that element. He does the 1st and 2nd symphonies. For example, those Tchaikovskyan elements, he does very well. He really does. And in the later symphonies, his attention to detail and his care with things like phrasing and articulation, all of that pays dividends. You're not going to hear your usual Sibelius here, but you have to give credit for the effort, for its musicality, for its intelligence, and it's very different, but legitimate. And so Sanderling on Berlin Classics is definitely worth considering if you know your Sibelius really well and are looking to hear a different approach. I think that's really, really what we're talking about there. Now we come to the 7 really good Sibelius cycles. The ones that have something to say in every symphony, that are consistently fine, where the conductor really knows what he's doing and he gets the orchestra to really do it with him first. And there's 7 of these. Oh my goodness. Only 7 more to go. Oh, can you believe it? Bernstein with New York Philharmonic. Always a great cycle. Again, there is some scruffy playing, particularly in the finale of the 6th Symphony, where the strings are going cha-cha, da-da-da-dum-ba, 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 da-da-da-dum. I'm not going to keep doing it, but you know the part I mean, right? And actually, Bernstein is one of the few conductors who actually takes the piece in tempo, who does what Sibelius wants. Maybe that's why the strings have so much trouble keeping up, because they do. But otherwise, it's a wonderful cycle. And, there are moments where if the sound of the orchestra is a little scruffy, it doesn't matter, because Sibelius can take some rough edges. I said this before. There should be some edge, some rawness, especially in things like, the first movement of the 4th, which is really gnarly, and, or the end of the 7th, where the horns are going that, wah, and the orchestra's screaming. There are moments when you can do that. And Bernstein, of course, was always one to realize those sort of expressionistic moments where the emotion boils over. I mean, it may boil over less so in the later works, but that doesn't mean they are a simmering cauldron of blandness. No. And bland, you would not call these performances. So Bernstein is definitely a great cycle. His later DG recordings, on the other hand, they're slow and heavy and dull, and I do not recommend them. I really don't. I know some people like them. I don't care. You're all wrong. All right. Lorin Maazel with the Vienna Philharmonic. This was his great Sibelius cycle. First of all, it's the Vienna Philharmonic. They always give an interesting textural gloss to whatever they do, because it sounds like the Vienna Philharmonic. So you've got, really big, bold horns, which is wonderful in Sibelius. There are some eccentricities here. For example, the first movement of the 5th is really fast. But on the whole, this is just a wonderful cycle. It really is, all the way through. Beautifully done. And it's just sort of, it makes you wonder what happens to these people when they do their next Sibelius cycle. And it turns out to be just the opposite. But this is really great. Maazel Vanska, also great. Maazel Vanska's first Sibelius cycle with Lotti. Now, this one was really noteworthy, first of all, because the Lotti Symphony Orchestra is a smallish orchestra. It's like a big chamber orchestra, so the textures tend to be very, very transparent. It's a welcome focus on woodwind sonority. Some of the tempi are really slow. The slow movement of the Fourth Symphony may be like the slowest ever. It's really slow. But on the whole, it all works. It all works. This is a cycle that gives you individuality without eccentricity, if you know what I mean. It has personality and character all its own, but it isn't gratuitous, and it isn't just, the conductor gazing at his navel. Sibelius is not good if you like to gaze at your navel. So there's no navel gazing. It's a wonderful cycle, and a tribute to Vanska, who, I don't know, like I said, sort of self-destructed for his Minnesota Sibelius cycle, which was so unnecessary. When you've done something, I just keep thinking back to Günter Wand, who did possibly the best ever modern recording of Beethoven's Ninth. And he always said, RCA wanted me to do another Beethoven Ninth. And I said, no. He said, because I can't do it better than that. Where's the humility? I mean, don't these people realize they should listen to their earlier work and say, whoa, wait a minute. Unless I can really improve on what I did before, not just do it different. Anyone can do it different. Anybody can wake up on the other side of the bed, and say, okay, I did it fast today. I'll do it slow tomorrow. There's nothing there. There's no intelligence in there. There's no artistic insight or legitimacy to that. So you just have to wonder. These guys should just say, I did it great. I'm done. Especially when you're doing it with the same label. What is the point of that? Anyway, we have to continue because we're getting to the final four. Mm-hmm. All right. Here's the countdown from number 4. Berglund and Bournemouth, his first Sibelius cycle. This is just a classic Sibelius cycle. The Bournemouth Symphony was always better than people gave it credit for being. Again, there's a little edge to the sound. It wasn't maybe the greatest orchestra in the world, but in this music, it's just right. It's the right sound for the music. Berglund's conducting is marvelous. He did Kullervo, although it's not included in this particular box. This also gives you like a whole bunch of tone poems and things, but unfortunately, not Kullervo, which is sort of crazy. I mean, you really should put it in there if you're going to do this stuff at all. I don't understand why they left it out. I'm sure they left it out. Yeah, but it's 4 discs. It doesn't matter. These are great performances. There are no weak links anywhere. And, you have Berglund was young and fresh, and everybody seemed to have something to prove in doing this cycle. And I cannot recommend it more highly, and it's cheap. It's inexpensive. It's just beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Berglund and Bournemouth Sibelius. It's legendary. It's a classic, and deservedly so, unlike Anthony Collins. Oh, also great. Segerstam. Leif Segerstam. Now, this is his second one. He did one for Chandos. The Chandos Sibelius cycle is rather dull. It really is. It's also kind of soft and flabby. But he pulled himself together magnificently with the Helsinki Philharmonic. There are some great performances in here. First of all, Segerstam is a violinist, and he pays a lot of attention, as does Storgaards, to string articulation, to making sure that all of those acres of tremolo always have energy. They always have, impulse. You hear the rhythmic edge that they give the music. It's the Helsinki Philharmonic. You should always have the Helsinki Philharmonic playing Sibelius. Ondine did a beautiful job recording this stuff. I think this cycle has the best Fourth Symphony out there. I really do. It's incredibly, unbelievably wonderful. And you get a great recording of the violin concerto with Pekka Kuusisto. And it's wonderful. I only wish that with the Fourth they had the original couplings, because it also had like the world's best Pohjola's Daughter and some other things. It's a wonderful, wonderful cycle. Gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous, so beautiful in so many spots and so right sounding. So on Undine Segerstam is a fabulous, fabulous choice. Top two. Number two, Colin Davis with the Boston Symphony. You know, this set really put Colin Davis on the map as a conductor in some ways, internationally. I mean, of course, he always had a reputation in England. This was one of the first things he did with Phillips, and it's just beautiful. I mean, Boston also has a great tradition of Sibelius because, of course, they did it with Koussevitzky. And you hear, and you still hear some of their really special timbre in this music. You know, they have, brass that are kind of, they have a little bit of vibrato to them. Some people have objected to that. The trombone solo in when it first comes in the Seventh Symphony, it's, wah, da, 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 that business. You have to get used to the sound. I think it's a wonderful sound. And these are beautiful, beautiful performances. Davis really was at his best. And you also get a fabulous disc of tone poems. Well, there was a separate disc of tone poems, but they're all in here, including a fabulous Pocula's Daughter, fabulous Tapiola, the Swan of Twinella, Valse Triste, great on Saga, a great Corelia suite, and the violin concerto with Salvatore Accardo. It's a wonderful, wonderful Sibelius cycle. First class. And you have Vic Firth playing timpani. And you have no idea how important the timpani parts are in Sibelius symphonies until you've heard Vic Firth play the timpani parts. Trust me on that. However, we have to come down to the last, the best, the most amazing Sibelius cycle belongs to, and you know this is coming, Blomstedt, Herbert Blomstedt with the San Francisco Symphony on Decca. Thank God he did this. I mean, because he did Nielsen. I mean, Blomstedt is the Scandinavian conductor of the 20th century par excellence. He's done beautiful Berwald. He's done beautiful, And this is the Sibelius cycle to really show you how Sibelius should go, and where there are absolutely no weak links anywhere. It's 100% consistent, gorgeously played, beautifully recorded. He's got the energy and passion for the first two symphonies. He's got the elegance, the detail, the sophistication for the last batch. You've got the heroism in the fifth. You have the wonderful detailing in the string parts. All of those things that we've been talking about, you can find here. Some people will object perhaps to a slight coolness in the first couple symphonies, but it's never bought at the expense of their romantic passion. They're just, there's a compensating sort of organic cogency and flow. I just can't imagine a better combination of positive qualities than you find in the Blomstedt Sibelius cycle. So there it is. Here it is. You get a close-up. It gets a close-up. Absolutely first class. Absolutely first class. And that, my God, this has been a slog, hasn't it? Yeah, our 20 some odd plus more to discuss Sibelius cycles. I mean, oh my goodness. But I think, you can get 4 or 5 or 6 of these and be very, very happy. And I'm just let me just do a little recap of the best ones, because these are a recap of the sucky ones, And let me just put them in order. Here we go. And we'll wrap it up. Okay, the best ones are Bernstein New York Phil on Sony, Maazel Vienna Phil on Decca, Vanska Lati Symphony on BIS, Berglund Bournemouth on EMI, Segerstam Helsinki on Undine, Davis Boston on Phillips, and last but not least, the however choice, Blomstedt San Francisco on Decca. These are the great Sibelius cycles, and frankly, anything in the last 7, you can mix them and match them, and they're all great in their ways. And I think that will do you for Sibelius. So keep on listening, folks. Thank you for joining me. Take care.